For those who don't know, Ryōtoku's introduction to Buddhist meditation was through a beginner's course with the West London Buddhist Centre in 2011. 2 years later, he began studying Rinzai Zen and later began a Zen junior teacher program. A couple of years after that, he continued his studies and began studying Tendai and subsequently joined a 2-year lay teacher program. This inspired him to begin studying at an academic level, and in 2020, Ryōtoku began a Master in Buddhist Studies at UNSW. After graduating in 2023, he travelled to Japan and received a Tokudo ordination at Mount Hiei with the Tendai tradition. So Ryōtoku is currently in Japan to complete his training and at the same time begin his PhD research. So thank you, Ryōtoku, for joining us. He's going to be talking about consciousness and the 5 wisdoms tonight. So quite a deep topic. And he's already said earlier, if anyone has any questions during the talk, just feel free to raise your hand, ask questions during the talk just to clarify things, because it will go deeper and deeper with each stage. So if you have any questions about any of the fundamental stuff that he's talking about, then it can be difficult to understand the more deeper level stuff. So please just raise your virtual hand or put it in the chat and we can clarify some of the theory as we go along. So thank you, Ryōtoku, for giving us this talk tonight.
And thank you for the introduction. What I would say now is I will begin with the chanting for reverence, and then the chanting for confessions of misdeeds, and then we'll begin a short meditation for mindfulness, and then we'll begin the talk. So I will begin chanting now. The Sanrai, which is the reverence. Ishin Shorai Jipo Kai Joju Sambo Ishin Shorai Jipo Kai Joju Sambo Ishin Shorai Jipo Kai Joju Sammo. Confessions of misdeeds. Ga shoku shouzo shōwaku go kaiyu mushi tonjinji jushingu ishi shōshō issai ga konkai sange. And now, mindfulness of breathing. In your own space, in your own time, hands on your lap. Slowly opening your eyes, returning to the room, returning to the talk. Thank you very much for the very brief mindfulness practice and short chanting session. We slowly will begin our talk for today. If I could ask for the leadership role in the Zoom so I can share my screen, or for the host position. Thank you very much. Okay. Now beginning to play the screen. Can everybody see the screen? Okay. Okay, thank you. Once again, I will try and look out, and I know Mayan will let me know if there's any questions. Feel free at any point in time just to stop me and I can clarify anything you'd like. So today's talk, consciousness and the five wisdoms. So the purpose of this talk is to demonstrate the Mahayana theory of mind and to explain how our mind shapes our experience of reality. So in the last talk, we focused primarily speaking on the Pali Canon's descriptions and using that as a way to understand the practice of meditation as a guidance from the state of ignorance to the state of wisdom. And it was a very practical based discussion. Today's a bit more theoretical, but we're going to try and find ways in which we can apply this to the practice we learned previously. And at the same time, we're going to understand a very important element is how our minds shape our experience of reality through distortion and through editing all the time, both actively and passively. I think there's a question already.
Oh no, it's just an announcement.
Okay. Okay, so going into looking still, nevertheless, even Mahayana theory is based on the Pali Canon's theories found in the early teachings. And we have a quote from the Dhammapada, the first chapter, first sentence. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are mind wrought. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. So mind itself and its activity done in a certain way can lead one to suffer. At the same time, with an impure mind, if one speaks or acts, this also brings about suffering in this world. And this is spoken about from the Dhammapada in terms of actively, is you actively going out speaking, and you actively going out acting. This shapes the way in which you see the world, in which you suffer from the world. But we'll go on to see how even passively, even without actively doing things, our mind is constantly shaping our reality, both for the good and for the bad. Again, in the Pali Canon, we have the Pafasara Sutra of luminous mind, and it says, luminous monks is the mind, and it is defiled by incoming defilements. The uninstructed run-of-the-mill person doesn't, I can't see that part, see that it is actually present, which is why I tell you that for the uninstructed run-of-the-mill person, there is no development of mind. So in here we have several factors. One, the mind is inherently bright and luminous, shining, impure. However, it is defiled by our own defilements, which is karmic and which is based on some skaras, one of the skandhas we looked at earlier. So our what's called kleshas, our defilements, and our karmas, both of these are emotional and intellectual obstructions. Emotional in the sense that it relates to greed, hatred, and delusion. These are the three fires which affect us in terms of our life in samsara, which affect how we see the world and how we engage in the world. And secondly, intellectual is our views that we construct about the world and about ourselves. These two types of views of obstructions, intellectual and emotional, are the ones that cloud our mind from seeing its natural radiance. Now, in the Mahayana, there is a slightly more expansion upon the relationship between these two states. This luminous mind, which is equated more so with the mind of an enlightened being, and this mind that's clouded with kleshas, in the Mahayana are seen as not separate, not two. So in the Mulla Madhyakarika of Nagarjuna, which is Nagarjuna's main text, he states that samsara does not differ from nirvana. Nirvana does not differ even slightly from samsara. So we see this throughout, especially the Prajna Paramita literature, this concept of emptiness, which is a non-dual understanding of both nirvana and samsara. So even though that may be the case, how does this relate to the mind once we're in samsara, and the mind of a Buddha once we escape samsara? So the way in which the Mahayana resolved this difference is to see the mind as actually as being one. The mind is one, its aspects are two. So from the Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana text, it states that consciousness has two aspects which embrace all states of existence and create all states of existence. They are, one, the aspect of enlightenment, and two, the aspect of non-enlightenment. So the mind is seen here in terms of what's seen as essence and function, which means the essence of mind is one, but it functions and operates in two ways. It can operate in an enlightened manner, and it can operate in an unenlightened manner. So the objective of practice is to realize that essence and to be able to act from a place of enlightenment. So what is consciousness? Covered slightly earlier in the previous talk, but we'll go over more elements today. So the momentary cognition of phenomena, things wherever they be, both internal and external. Consciousness, or vijnana, is one of the five skandhas, one of the five constituents of a being that cycles and continues from birth to death, that's cling together based upon grasping and desire. It's also one of the 12 links of codependent origination, one of the stages of condition which conditions birth and death from life to life. Vijnana, or consciousness as an activity, separates the experiences we have in the world based upon subject and object, which is based on ourselves, which exists as a subject, and the world around us as objects. And at the same time, differentiates those objects from each other. Consciousness arises due to contact of a sense object, being an object in the world, and a sense media, being our I. So in consciousness, for example, our I, consciousness is divided into six, for the most part, within the Pali Canon, being the consciousness related to the mind, and then the five senses, five sense organs. So, for example, the I consciousness arises only when there is an object of sight, and that object of sight comes into contact with our eye. Then we see this is the I consciousness, and all of the six operate in the same way. However, when you are unconscious, or when there is no contact with any sense object, that consciousness is said to cease. However, that would mean that the person would cease, because all consciousness would end, which would essentially be cessation. So there had to be something which linked consciousness from one moment to the next, pervaded, and which would store at the same time the samsaric and karmic elements, which was the objective of practice, which we'll come to slightly later, which will be the purpose of this talk. But at the same time, we're looking at the second aspect, the enlightened aspect now. Now, the enlightened aspect is related to jnana, wisdom, and the unenlightened is vijnana, consciousness. Now, they both can be seen to be translated as consciousness because they're very similar, as you could see in the etymology of the word itself. The part V before jnana relates to separation, to separate or to be distinct. And this is part of the mind which itself separates itself into sections, and at the same time observes the world and separates it into sections. This jna is very related to our English word know and knowledge, and the Greek word gnosis. And it's often linked more closely with the word gnosis in Greek, because this word gnosis is linked with direct knowledge, often transcendental knowledge of the divine, but it's a mystical knowledge where the person and the object of their attention know itself through direct contact, not through inference or through a subject and object distinction. It's also similar, found in the word prajna. If you know, prajna is another term often used to say wisdom. That jna is the same. And that pra means, as in our word, pri. So pri, jna, prajna, which is knowledge of what's come before, like pri. It's very similar to the word prognosis, but slightly different meaning, but very similar origins. So jnana Jnana is direct knowledge, direct awareness, without a subject and object distinction between the viewer and that which is viewed. So in the Lanka Avatara Sutra, it kind of, one of the sutras in the Mahayana canon, which goes into detail about these consciousnesses and the Mahayana perspective. And in this one, it talks about more than 6. It speaks about the Alaya Vijnana, and then the Manas Vijnana, which is a 6th and 7th consciousness. So it says, what are the 8? This is what the Buddha states in the Lankavatara Sutra. They are the Tathagata Garbha, known as the Alaya Vijnana. The Alaya Vijnana is the root consciousness. Alaya means ground or root, and Vijnana is consciousness. And that Tathagata Garbha, Tathagata is Buddha, and Garbha is embryo. So this is the Buddha embryo. This is often translated as Buddha nature. So here in the text, it equates the Buddha nature, which is the potentiality for Buddhahood, with the ground consciousness, the ground of one's own mind. And then it states that Manas, which is the 7th consciousness, Manas Vijnana, then the Mano Vijnana, which is the 6th, and the system of the 5 Vijnanas of the senses are as regarded as by the philosophers of the past. These are the ones that are known from before. So these are the 8 consciousness, which I will go into more detail shortly. So the 8 consciousnesses, or the 8 Vijnanas. Now, the consciousness of the 5 senses we all know of from the Pali Canon teachings of the taste, touch, smell, sight, and audible. Once the object and the organ come into contact, the consciousness arises. The Manos Vijnana, also spoken in the Pali Canon, arises in a similar manner. It's referred to as Manos, as one of the many words for mind in the Indian tradition. Sometimes Manos, sometimes Vijnana, sometimes Chitta. All of these words relate to mind. In Mahayana, the Manos Vijnana is a word for the 6th consciousness of the mind. The Manas Vijnana, now this is a kind of a new Vijnana. This is the one which is often referred to as the defiling consciousness, because this is the consciousness which creates the sense of a self. It sits on the barrier between the external world of seeing things and thoughts and the internal world of samskaras, of karma, and of the unconscious world. So this sits on the barrier between. It projects and it overlays and discriminates between the external world, and it clings and grasps onto the internal world as a self. This is the function of the Manas. It's the creator. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. It sits there as the veil between and presents itself as one way, but secretly being another way. The Alaya Vijnana is the ground of the mind hidden behind the veil, unseen behind those. Here is stored all of your past, your karma, and your samskaras and your pleasures. And from here, all the other consciousnesses spring forth. This is the ground. So Alaya means ground or root. So these consciousnesses represent the unenlightened mind's state of which we all participate in all the time. Yes, Simran.
Yes, thank you, Ryōtoku. My question is about the Vijnana, about which contains about the last one about like our past karma and things like that. But I know that like it's a consciousness and like it sort of exists, but I feel like the other ones I can see how we are aware of that consciousness. Like I know when I'm touching something, or even the mind consciousness. But with the Alaya Vijnana, isn't that it's sort of like well, at least to me, it feels like an unconsciousness because I don't know like where my past karma came from. So how could that then be a consciousness?
Well, it's literally, as you said, it literally is correct. It is the unconscious mind. So if you think of it specifically in Carl Gustav Jung's systems of philosophy, psychology, not philosophy, psychology, he separates the mind into 3 levels, which you have the ego mind, or the id, I believe, and then you have the unconscious mind and then the subconscious mind. So this is, like you say, it is unconscious, but it is conscious because it's conscious in its unconscious state. So it's not dead, it's not dormant, it's still active. Because if you think about what we think about unconscious, we think like it's just gone, it's just dead, like it's turned off. This is kind of like when, you know, like for example, maybe it's a silly analogy, but even you think of your phone, if you say, "Hey Siri," it wakes up because it's always listening and waiting. It's always that consciousness, even though it's unconscious, it's always active. So the ally is like that. It's always there, even though it seems like it's off and it's out of your realm. You can't interact with it, you can't engage with it, you can't do anything. But from there, it can act. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, thank you. But just to confirm, that mean you said we can't like engage with it. Is there a potential for that, or is it just the way it is that it's just the unconsciousness and we can't really access it?
Yeah, so again, it's very much similar to the unconscious state in our mind normally. So, for example, in dreams is somewhat of a interaction with the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind is expressing itself through symbols, and so but you're not directly engaging it. You're engaging with it almost like an echo. So this is part of what this school of Yogacara is trying to focus on, the fact that there are some parts of reality that it's very difficult or almost impossible to engage with directly. But through practice, you can engage with them by separating that barrier between you and the thing you're looking at. So this is samadhi. And so in the last talk, we covered the jhanas. And in the third jhana, there was a state of samadhi in which the samskaras come into full view. And this is when, like almost like a dream state, where all of the things in your subconscious mind begin to flood and express themselves into your conscious mind. So the purpose of practice, even though these consciousnesses are split into 8, is to unite them into one, where the conscious mind and the unconscious mind become one, and one can understand one's karma and specifically one's samskaras, which is the impressions and the cycle of those karmic seeds. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I really great explanation and link to dreams as well as some experiences I've had in meditation of things do pop up that you didn't realize were there, but probably laying stagnant in that unconscious mind. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. And we're going to come into deeper elements of this later. And this is a very important point, and it's again one thing that we all experience it to some degree, again in dreams and in deep states of meditation, and it's like one of the focuses of the Yogacara school. So as we move on to wisdoms now wisdoms are the jnanas, are these elements of the consciousnesses when they express themselves in their truest form. Now the bottom one, the wisdom of the Dharma realm, is the jnana. Once again, we spoke about the consciousnesses being split into 8, and in wisdoms they are united into one. And the fundamental essence of all the jnanas, or the wisdoms, is what's called the Dharma realm, or the Dharma Dhatu, wisdom or consciousness or awareness. And this is the essence and the most purest and finest and truest state of mind. From here, once again, all the other wisdoms come forth, and then from these wisdoms come the consciousnesses in their unenlightened mode. But here we're looking at the enlightened state of being that the Buddhas themselves possess. So the wisdom of action is 5 jnanas, 5 senses transformed into the ability to act and engage. So even Buddhas and the Buddha nature, etc., it has an expression of it which is active and engages within the world. So it's not completely mind only. It's not completely hidden away. It engages in reality. The wisdom of differentiation is the mind or the enlightened mind's ability to differentiate between things and remove doubt between things. The wisdom of sameness is the wisdom that sees the equality of all things. The mirror-like wisdom is the ability of the mind to completely reflect that which is observing without changing or editing or obscuring that which it sees. So it's the pure mind like a mirror. All of these are important and give a complete view of the mind of the enlightened mind. Because when people think of emptiness and this mind that sees all things as equal, sometimes we forget about, at the same time, it still possesses the ability to differentiate between the multiplicity. So it isn't as though it sees everything as one and only as one. Paradoxically, it sees everything as many and one at the same time. And at the same time, this enlightened mind isn't stuck within only its mind. It's able to act out into this world, throughout the world. So all of these wisdoms reflect important elements of the Buddha nature that's within us, and the activities of Buddhas throughout the universe who are able to express their enlightened mind from within throughout the world. So we're looking at the alaya consciousness, the way in which the Mahayana and the Yogacara people see the alaya as the fundamental consciousness. Because it's also referred to as the ground and the root consciousness, in many ways it is the most important one. Now, the way in the text describe it is it seemed to be like an ocean. And an ocean is of one flavor and taste, but has many expressions. And the waves that split it and part it make it look like it's multiple, but at the same time, it expresses itself and function as many, but it is one. And when the water stills and when the ocean is calm, the ocean functions as a mirror, able to reflect the sky. And this is often seen as in samatha. The practice of samatha is the mind which is turbulent, is the calming and the tranquiling of the mind. Unifying the mind is samhati, and seeing is the vipassana. And so our practice is to understand the mind and its terminus as consciousness, to unite it in this way. And this is from the Lankavatara Sutra, and it says, by wrong discrimination, the vijnana rises as eightfold, like waves on the great ocean. And then it also states, it is like a great ocean in which the waves roll on permanently, but the body itself subsists uninterruptedly, quite free from fault of impermanence, unconcerned with the doctrine of ego substance, and thoroughly pure in its essential nature. So even the alaya itself has two aspects. At the ground and the very root, it is like the deep sea, completely unperturbed by the waves. It stays and remains, and in this state, it's very close and very related to its enlightened state as the mirror-like wisdom and as the Tathagata Garbha. So the function of the alaya is, once we die, our consciousnesses that we are aware of, because we lose our body, they cease. However, the alaya draws back in all of that energy, all of that karmic seed, all of that stuff, pervades and travels on into the next life, and then it continues. So this is the baseline consciousness, the stream, the mind stream, which contains all of the other stuff that we equate as the self, the skandhas, so to speak, except the body. And it arises once again in birth. And this is the same thing as moment to moment to moment. So it's life to life, moment to moment. The alaya is the storehouse consciousness, which holds all of these things. And the alaya consciousness arises and exists in its state as it is because of the samskaras which are held, which is, if you remember samskaras, one of the skandhas linked to will and volition and impressions of actions. It comes together with the apprehension of an external reality. When these two things come together, we have the alaya in its clouded and state. So it's also referred to as the seed storehouse, which is the karmic seed storehouse, the bija seeds of our own mind and our own past, and the root consciousness, for multiple reasons, the root in which all things spring out from. So when we look at the manas, now we're looking at the seventh consciousness, we're looking at the way in which the mind perceives reality and the way in which our mind perceives that reality again. Yes, Simran. Did you have...
Yes, I did put something in the chat. I wanted to ask about the alaya. When it's like transferred, let's say we lose our body, where is it stored and how then does it transfer into another being?
So that's covered by several different thinkers, and every different tradition has a different view as to how that happens. For the most part, there is an intermediary state between death and new life, in which this alaya goes in. And there's different theories, but it kind of takes on an intermediary form in this state. And it's bound with the jiva, which is the life force, and these two, Vijnana and jiva, exist together in this. In Tibetans call it the bardo, which is the intermediary plane. The Theravadins don't believe it exists. In Theravada tradition, it goes straight from death into the new embryo of the mother, and from there it comes in. But even in the Pali Canon, nevertheless, it does state there is an intermediary state in which I'm not sure what the purpose or function of the state is, but there is a state, and then from there it goes into the womb of the mother, and then the new life begins.
Ryōtoku, there were just also a couple of comments about the sound.
Ah,
I'm not sure there was a bit of a scratchy sound. I'm not sure whether something's brushing against something. But
no, I've got train tracks by my house, so
ah,
now and then it just so noisy, and I think it just cuts out the sound because
yeah.
it's really loud.
Okay, the Zoom that's kind of sound cancelling.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, we can't really do anything about that.
Now, even now, like I have to like really shout. I don't know if you can hear me now, but it's
Yeah,
really loud.
yeah. Okay. Okay, no
Can you
worries.
hear me there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
It's generally okay. It's just like every once in a while it's crackly, but
yeah. Okay, all right. Let me know if I should repeat because yeah, it's a problem. But
okay.
yeah, sorry.
It's all right. No worries.
So reality perceived. So if you remember, we had the manos, the six conditioners. We had the manas of the seventh, and then the alaya of the eighth. So now this is the intermediary state in which we perceive reality from the outside and we grasp onto the inside. So this this is not Buddhism. This is just general how biology, how we perceive the external world. Now here, the eye looks outside, sees an image, and then it's sent it's an electronic signal to the brain. The brain receives that and then passes that back as an image that we see within our own head. But the image that we engage with within our own head is processed by the brain. It goes through loads of filters and processes, and then we finally get this image, which we see outside our mind as an apple. And with that image, you might look at it, and there's loads of associations you have about the apple, not just its color, but its taste, its texture, and all of these things. Your mind overlays onto that image to make you think this is an apple. So this is the function of the mind and the manas. The manas specifically, and its ability to edit and flavor and add additional information that doesn't actually exist. This is linked to, in the Yogacara theory, called the three natures of reality. At the same time, there's always these three things happening side by side, both within us and outside in reality. So the nature of phenomena as constructed by concepts and language, imagined, is the constructed reality. The nature of phenomena as dependent, which is dependent upon causes and conditions, is the reality as is, which is a dependent reality, known as pratya, samutpada, etc. in the Pali Canon in Pali. The nature of things in essence, without any imagination, we call it the without imagination reality, which is it's called the consummated reality, which is a bit of a strange word, but it means this is the reality as is, without any mental overlay on what we're looking at. We're going to come into this now. Now, this story is by Vasubandhu, one of the founders of the Yogacara school. And he says, a man at night encounters a snake lying on a road and becomes frightened. He wants to run away, but then decides to examine it more closely. Upon closer inspection of the snake, he sees that it's not a snake, but it's a rope. Now, this is, again, two levels of reality. This is a simile, not the best simile, but this is the simile he uses to describe how the mind plays tricks on us. Now, the snake itself is related to the constructed reality of our imagination, how we edit things and make things seem to the way they are when they're not actually the way we think they are. The rope itself is the way things actually is. This is a dependent nature, the codependent nature. However, even upon examining the rope further, we find we can break it down into more and more layers of reality, breaking it down into each strand, breaking it down into the substance of hemp, and even then into the elements. But even then, from the hemp, we can break it down into the water, the sunlight, the ground, the soil, the insects, the environment. We can further expand what we're seeing into its ecosystem. This is the independent nature of things, truly, as it is, without ourselves, our mind, ourselves overlaying onto that thing. And each thing becomes dependent and interrelated to many, many, many other things beyond just what we're seeing. So these are the three natures that exist at every point in time at the same time. So the Dharma Dhatu is the Dharma realm, is related to the consummated nature. And if you remember, the Dharma Dhatu was one of the names of the wisdoms of the mind, the jnanas. The Dharma Dhatu is related to the Tathagata Garbha. I'm sorry, there's a lot of Sanskrit here, but these are important words in the Mahayana theory of mind. The Tathagata Garbha, the womb, the embryo, the matrix of the Buddhas. And this Dharmakaya is Dharma, again, Dharma and Kaya, the body. And so the relationship between these is the relationship between our mind, the alaya, which is equated with the Tathagata Garbha, and its ability to produce the realization of the Dharma Dhatu, of the Dharmakaya, our own natural body, as the body of the Buddha. And Nagarjuna states that as butter, though inherent is milk, is mixed with it, and hence does not appear. Just so the Dharma Dhatu is seen as long as it is mixed together with the afflictions. So what Nagarjuna is saying here is that the essence of butter is milk, but the milk cannot be seen as milk because of all of the other things within it that's been mixed in with it. But the nature, it's still within it pure. And the Dharma Dhatu, or the true nature of our own self, is the same. Like in the previous passage of the luminous mind, the mind pure, or the ocean's bottom unchanged. These similes and metaphors are there to describe how the mind, no matter what happens, itself remains pure. However, when you see it, it seems impure and mixed with other things. And it's the objective of practice to access the milk. The milk is an allegory for the natural and pure inherent nature of the mind, and which goes through different kinds of processes. Ghee is often, you might have heard this, these analogies before of butter, milk, cream, and ghee in different sutras. But this is a very common Indian motif. Simran.
I'm sorry again for all the questions, but I just want to ask about this. It's also similarly reminds me of how sometimes there's like a bottle of water and then there's like a bit of dirt, and then if you shake it, like, and then it goes down. But the thing is, it still like goes down, but then like, for example, the dirt or the glitter or whatever, then it still sinks to the bottom. It's still sort of there. Similarly here, we can see like there's milk, but there's other things. But then it says, as long, just so the Dharma Dhatu is not seen, as long as it is mixed with together. But how do you actually get rid of such afflictions? Like, where does it go?
Well, the funny thing is that in Buddhism, those afflictions are not separate, are not different from the Dharma Dhatu themselves. So this is the practice one of the realization of it. It's the investigation of seeing the essence of that which we're observing. So the practice of the Buddha nature is to look and see deeply into that thing you're looking at. And when you look at it so deep, you become one with the thing that you're looking at. The only way for you to know something that you observe is to become that thing that you're observing. And as you and that thing become one, you realize you are one and the same nature. So this process of defilements, which can be tricky and difficult, is to observe all things as though they are us. Well, deeply enough so that we see it from the perspective of oneness, samadhi. And this practice is where you see that dirt and butter and milk all have one essence. So one essence, two functions. It's the one essence is the aim of observing here in Buddhism that we're trying to get to.
And then that would lead towards realizing the nothingness. Is that right?
So
In a way?
sunyata can be translated as nothingness, but it's not the best translation because often it can lead to misunderstandings of what we're trying to find. Because once again, it's nothingness, but it's also luminous. So there's also light and brightness and meritorious qualities, positive qualities of enlightenment and of the Buddha. So it's both empty and at the same time filled with light and with compassion and with metta. All of these things are part of Buddha nature. So the essence of things is only nothing in that it doesn't have a self essence, a separate self from the whole. And it's realizing this that's what emptiness is about. Emptiness is not a thing itself. Emptiness is just realizing that it's empty of what you mistakenly thought was there. Helena.
Yes, thank you for explaining that. It just came into my mind about in Hinduism, I think the self extends to everything. The Brahma is everywhere. So how is Buddhism different in that sense? Because you said that when you see yourself in everything, then you understand it.
Come back to me very slightly. In the Q&A section, remind me, I'm going to cover this.
Oh, yeah. But thank you.
Oh no. Sorry, my breaking up.
Oh, no,
Sorry. It's probably going to take a while to reset, so.
we can still hear and see you okay. And then
Okay.
going, yeah.
Okay,
Ryōtoku, there was also another question in the chat. I might just read it out.
okay.
Can you elaborate on what is the Tathagata? It translates thus come, thus go. What does that mean? Maybe we only realize the meaning in a transcendental state of consciousness.
So it's best to think of it as just Buddha. Not worry about the exact meaning. But the way in which it's interpreted is that Buddhas neither come nor go. So it's a bit confusing because it's the nature of the Dharmakaya. So it's called the thus come and the thus gone, but Buddhas neither come nor go, which is the nature of the Dharmakaya as being neither present nor far. So it's a bit of a paradoxical way to understand the nature of enlightenment. So it's a bit confusing, but it's best to think of it as Buddha, but it's a way to kind of secretly put in the paradoxical nature of the Buddha. Looking at this concept of Dharma Dhatu and Dharmakaya, these two things are kind of paradoxical. You have a body and you have a realm, but these two things are opposite. How can you have a body which exists in a certain place and a reality, both saying to be the same thing? Because on the one hand, the Buddha was said to be born and to have died, but at the same time, the true body of the Buddha is said to be all pervasive. So did the Buddha come and go, or was the Buddha always here? So this paradox is something that the Buddha doesn't want to explicitly say, but as mentioned, it's something that wants to be said through realization. And I will come to Helena's point about the nature of the self and the all-pervasiveness of the self, because it's actually a bit complex. And as we go over the concept of Dharma Dhatu and Dharmakaya and Tathagata Garbha, these three things kind of can be misinterpreted as a self similar to Atman and Brahman. So I'm going to go over that slightly at the end. Let me move on to the next slide. We're almost at the end. So the Dharma Dhatu, as I mentioned, is beyond inconceivable knowledge, intellectual comprehension, trying to understand the Dharma Dhatu, similar to the Tathagata, the nature of what is a Buddha, what is a Buddha. These things are difficult to grasp. And so in the Pali Canon, the Buddha spent most of his career speaking about the qualities of nirvana and enlightenment in a negative language, which means that it's without suffering, it's without greed, without ignorance, without hate. Using negative language and even emptiness and sunyata, all of this empty language is to remove the obstacles to allow you to realize the inconceivable. But trying to describe the inconceivable is impossible. And so the Buddha, generally speaking, refrained from doing so. Now, the Indra's net is one other way. It's a very popular simile or allegory for the nature of reality as being a net that the Deva or the god Indra cast, in which there was a jewel, which within the jewel reflected all of the other jewels. And within each jewel, you can see all of the other jewels and the jewel itself reflected and refracted. And so the universe is said to be exactly the same, in which all things reflect all other things at the same time. this is the Avatamsaka's realm of the inconceivable, which is the description of the Dharma Dhatu, the true realm of reality. And this goes far to describe, one, the realm of phenomena in all its ways, the realm of emptiness in all its ways, the interfusion of phenomena and emptiness, and the interfusion of phenomena and phenomena. So these are said to be the 4 ways to understand Dharma Dhatu, each of the 4 existing truly at the same time, specifically supposed to blow your mind in a paradoxical nature. If any of you have ever read the Avatamsaka Sutra, the purpose of the sutra is to blow your mind with its descriptions of reality in order for you to not grasp so much on the literal translations, but for you to actually see the world for yourself. So this world is depicted visually in esoteric Buddhism and in Vajrayana Buddhism as actual Buddhas. These 5 Buddhas represent the 5 wisdoms, represented in the center as the central Dharma Dhatu wisdom. In Vajrayana Buddhism, he is represented as Mahavairochana. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, he is depicted as Vairochana in the pagoda, and in the Lotus Sutra, he also appears as the second Buddha, the primordial Buddha. And this is also depicted here as in this way of 5, with the 5 wisdoms, with the central one being Dharma Dhatu and the 4 preliminary ones outside. And this is again depicted as a universe, as a realm. So in continuing from Mahayana Buddhism into Vajrayana Buddhism, is this way to graphically represent this realm of inconceivability of Buddhas within Buddhas emanating outwards, where we ourselves are part of this world, if this mandala, or this circle of this commune of reality, in which the all-pervasiveness of the primordial Buddha, which Shakyamuni itself is a representation of throughout the world. So this is just a little bit of a extra information, which is just a way to see how the Vajrayana people understand the Dharma Dhatu and try, and because they can't speak about it, they draw it in a visual means, in which is a way to understand the universe through art. And I think that is it. So this is a quick summary. So the mind is constantly interpreting the world through its own lens. We look out into the world, reinterpret the world, and then reinterpret again, and then we make our judgments and decisions based upon our own misapprehensions of reality. So reality experience is seen as differentiated and shaped by one's karma and one's kleshas, as intellectual and emotional obscurations. Reality, when seen as unobstructed, is seen as one with the objective of its experience. So reality, true, is the reality of the Dharma Dhatu, where the subject and the object are not different. Even those kleshas and those obstructions, when viewed truly and seen, are not different from that Dharma Dhatu, and not different, therefore, with our essential nature. Now, the reality of oneself is the Tathagata when unrealized. So the Buddha, we all have this Buddha potentiality, this Buddha womb, this Buddha embryo, and it gives birth to our own realization in time. Once this Buddha embryo is realized or is made manifest, it is referred to as the Dharmakaya, the body of the Buddha, the Dharma Dhatu, the realm of the Buddha, the realm of the inconceivable, all-pervasive reality. And that's it. Okay, thank you so much. So there's a lot there. The most confusing and difficult things I definitely think is the end. So I'm happy to go through questions. And I think Helena's question is probably one of the most difficult ones, and the ones that comes up when people talk about Buddhas, the bodies of the Buddhas, multiple Buddhas, and the relationship between us and the Buddhas and all-pervasiveness. And the short answer is that the difficulty is the problem of the self. When we're talking about reality and the mind, we can speak about the interrelationship between us and the universe as our essential nature pervading throughout the whole universe to a certain degree. However, when we talk about ourself as being one with the Brahman, or even ourself being one with the Buddha, and this being all pervasive, then this is where the problem lies, because of that concept of the self. Now, Buddhism believes that the concept itself of selfhood is flawed, and this is what creates the obstruction, and this is an actual obstruction. So to say that there's no self, most people in Buddhism will say Buddha teaches that there's no self, but this isn't completely true. The Buddha doesn't teach self. The Buddha doesn't teach no self. The whole concept of a self is a fabrication that we have as a bit of a coping mechanism to have some sort of identity. So when you believe in no self, you grasp onto no self as a way to understand self, and then you suffer. Or if you believe in self like Atman, you grasp onto self, and then you suffer. So both non-self and both self, both as concepts that you hold on to, lead to suffering. But the realization that the concept of self itself, both non-self and non-self, is what the Buddha rejected. So it's a little bit confusing, but I think if we think of that as both self and non-self as a construct, or as an umbrella thing, like self, and then underneath self, there's self and non-self. It's this umbrella term of self that the Buddha wanted to reject, because we want to hold on to, we're always thinking about self, 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 or non-self, non-self, non-self. And it's this was what leads us through samsara.
Okay.
Helena, how was that?
Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank
Great.
you, thank you.
Thumbs up. There's a question in the chat already, and everyone else who has questions, please put your hand up or feel free to ask it in the chat. So one of the questions is, hi Ryōtoku, great talk. While it's fascinating to learn about the different philosophical doctrines, what's your advice on how to navigate these differences in a way that's meaningful and relevant to our lives, regardless of the interpretations from different traditions and or schools?
Good question, and a very important question. So firstly, it always depends on the traditional school. Some traditional schools' teachings can be more applicable than others. For me, Yogacara is very applicable because it teaches you and reminds you about how in which your mind shapes reality. Now, the ultimate and the perfect way is, yes, we're all Buddhists. Okay, yeah, maybe that's the perfect way. But that's very abstract and very vague. Very difficult to apply that to real life. But the other extreme of that is to see how in which our mind misapprehends things. For example, just the allegory of the rope and the snake is just a very good analogy of how we can see something and we can get an emotional reaction from that, like fear. But then that emotional reaction came from our own mind, which means our mind can produce a lot of things when we don't even realize it. The person in that story, managed to double check. Was that really a snake or was it really a rope? If he didn't, he would have generated that thing in and of himself without being based on an external world. So knowing that the mind has this power is very important, because now when we're engaging in real day-to-day life, we can start to say how much of my emotional state and emotional intellectual thoughts are coming about from reality, or is coming about based on my own misapprehensions of reality. And I think that in and of itself is a fundamental practice that is very important, and that we should always be trying to engage in.
So then day to day, if an emotional state comes up for us, how should we best address it?
So it always depends on the severity of the emotional state. I'm somebody I do martial arts. I train, I compete. So before competition, I always get nervous, and nerves come. And then, so I have to ask myself, why am I nervous? What does it mean? What does competing mean? And secretly behind the conscious thought, there is a stream of other thoughts. I don't want to lose. I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to get hurt, and all of these things. And by going through and seeing all of those things, you can essentially calm all of those insecurities down. All of those fears and stuff are there. But the emotional trigger is there to say, basically, fight or flight is going to say, you're going to die, you're going to get hurt. It's because he wants to protect you. So emotionally, your mind tells you all of these things that aren't true, just so you can go somewhere and be safe. And so that's like one of the worst case scenarios of fight or flight, where you can easily calm yourself down by observing that process of thinking that's there behind the scene. So we mentioned like the alaya, which is the unconscious mind, and the manas. The alaya consciousness is the ground from which things come. It's completely unconscious. But the manas is the part of the mind which projects. It's there, it sits there in between and starts to tell you, the conscious you, what to think and how to think. And by backtracking and retracing the steps of thoughts and feelings, you can move towards the source, which would be towards the alaya. And that practice helps you to see the truth of what you think is to be the actual truth of what you think is the case. And very often you're able to actually free yourself from the bounds of your own thoughts that which constrict you. And it's the same thing with almost any emotional state, in my opinion. It's not easy, but by observing it and trying to get to the source of where it comes from, what does this mean? Why are you saying this? Why are you saying don't do this? What to yourself? These emotions and thoughts, you can see that that it's not based often in reality. Most of our thoughts and our feelings are there just to protect us. So it would tell us to do anything like in order to us to keep us safe. And this is not always true. What's more important, your mind is to survive.
Okay. So the main aim is really to really explore the alaya mind, or to bring the unconscious into the conscious and try and dig deeper beneath the surface what's going on in the mind.
Yeah. So the Buddhist philosophy is that the essence of mind is good. Your nature, your true nature is good. It's not neutral. It's not bad. So a lot of people believe that they're bad people. Deep down, they're bad people. So if they go and they don't want to see that negative sides of themselves, and there might be some negative sides of yourself that you may see, that doesn't mean that you're inherently bad. So by going deep, even beyond the bad stuff, you'll see good. But that is scary for some people to go deep within themselves and see things about themselves they don't like. But the encouragement that the Buddha has is to keep going. Don't stop when you see something scary or negative. If you keep going deep, you'll find something positive. Johnny.
Hey, thank you for the really interesting talk. I was curious about the concept of the unconscious, that when we die and lose the sense of all of our existing other forms of consciousness, but there's that part that carries over in terms of the karmic seeds. Wouldn't that in itself almost imply that there's a self, because you have your own, I suppose, ledger of historic karmas from multiple different lifetimes? Or is it more that if we take the approach of everything being like the multiple Buddhas that exist within all of us, is it more of a communal sense of karma rather than it being attached to the self? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So with the communal karmic position, it's something that has been theorized even in the Yogacara school. Is there a shared karma? Is the alaya vajnana distinct? Or is it multiplied with many people? And so there isn't a unanimous agreement. However, for the most part, the existence of a separate stream, independent, does not mean that there's a self, according to the definition, at least, that the Buddha had. Once again, the problem with the self is what is the criteria for something to be self? There is definitely differences and there's definitely distinctions, but at the same time, those things are still dependent on other things. They don't have its own separate existence, completely independent. And so this is really where the issue of self lies, because self relies on the fact that this thing can exist in and of itself without other things also supporting its existence. And that's really what the Buddha denied, because the self mostly is related to the concept of Atman, the concept of an individual and distinct element of reality of the universe that exists as a part of a whole called Brahman. And it's specifically this element that was negated. And so if we define self in other ways, we can kind of justify the existence of a self. But I would say that it isn't overly useful. But definitely there are differences in, like, obviously there's me and there's you, and we're not the same person, at least in terms of how we're interacting now. We have different karmic paths. I can't resolve your karma. You can't resolve my karma. Nevertheless, at the same time, we also have a shared existence. So we're not completely separate, because our existence is united, at least in different levels. Like we had the 3 levels of reality, both physically in the environment we live in as being part of one organism called Earth, also in terms of the Dharma Dhatu realm of essential nature of reality, we're all part of a shared nature on its very essential reality. So we have both like these two sides of an independent nature and a separate nature. So just the separate nature isn't enough to say, yes, that there is a self. Does that answer the question or assist in understanding a little bit?
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just related to that, does storehouse consciousness come into play here in between lives? Or I've never really understood that concept. So,
Definitely. So the storehouse consciousness is what helps to kind of like, you could say, bind consciousness from each moment to the next moment. So especially because the consciousness only exists with contact. So once contact ends, then technically consciousness should end. And so what links each consciousness together is the ground, is the alaya, which is like the ocean of the waves, of the current, of the streams and the rivers and the cycle of rain. It's all come together within this thing called alaya. So both from each moment and between life and death. Sinsen, did you have a question? Oh, then I think you're meeting Sinsen.
Sorry, thank you, Ryōtoku. Sorry, I've got two questions here. You mentioned earlier that the Buddha rejected the notion of non-self and self. Sorry, no self and self, because this actually generates attachment, as you said before. So what is the definition of anatta or anatman then, if that's the case? I mean, it is it seems to be understood as non-self, the way it is usually presented. But or is there a different interpretation according to different traditions? And of course, again, that's related to sunyata as well, like the sunyata and anatta.
Yeah.
So just wanted to get a bit of clarification on that.
Give two definitions. One, first of all, you shouldn't necessarily think of anatta as requiring a definition, but anatta is a tool, a device. It's there as a means, as like a medicine to be taken for a sickness. The sickness is self, and the anatta is there to resolve the sickness. It's actually a practice, a tool, not a doctrine. Is the best way to understand anatta. And secondly, when we think of anatman or atman as the self, which often defined without self, and that's often said to be better than not self or non-self. So, to be honest, I think a lot of it is semantics. I think that I don't think we should get too caught up in whether that should be without, non, or not. I think the issue is how we see self. Do we see self as something that exists, that's negated, or do we see self as a concept that which we created and then we're arguing over this concept? So we ourselves have created this thing called self, and then we're arguing whether this thing exists or doesn't exist. But then it's like, well, you just made it up. So the conversation doesn't make any sense in its first place. I think that's the Buddhist kind of frustration. So that would be my best way to try and describe the concept of self or not self, is that we just get caught up. If we hear there's non-self, we panic and we get scared and we think, oh my God, there's not a self. But it doesn't matter. The main thing is realizing the truth. If we are scared, then we should try and see it, and I think that's enough. Just holding on to it itself isn't useful. I think that using it as a means, as a device for us to investigate, that maybe the Buddha said there's no self, maybe he said there is a self. I'm going to try and see for myself. I think that's enough.
Okay. So the idea is to move beyond concepts ultimately and to...
Yeah. So you mentioned sunyata, and that's a good... So the Buddha's path is one in which, as I mentioned, emotional obscurations, often people forget intellectual obscurations as well. So emotional obscurations, definitely ignorance and hatred and greed, these things can form afflictions in our heart and mind. But views, ditthi, is a concept in Pali in which we create views and opinions and ideas about how we shape the world. This is also very, very important for us to be able to see beyond. And the first sutta in the Digha Nikaya, the long discourses, the Brahmana Sutta, is focused heavily on about how views is what binds people in this net of Brahma, this net of samsara, is how we always have to have an opinion or construct that we've created, and then we attach to it and identify with it. And this practice is what leads us to suffering. So self is one of the major identities and views that we held that we can't let go of, both self and not self. And so just the practice of trying to let go of our conceptualizing all the time of self is important. But at the same time, the mind is very important. It doesn't mean that you should forget who you are, what that means. It means you should investigate your own mind to find out who you are and what that means. And so there is like a paradox, almost like a contradiction in the idea that you need to work on your own enlightenment. At the same time, there is no self. So this is a very confusing a doctrine. And I think that if we think of it as a doctrine, it becomes confusing. But if we think of it as a method, then it becomes useful. Somebody asked a question, sorry, about...
Yeah, there was a couple of questions in the chat. Shall I read it out?
Please.
Yeah. So the question is the process of uniting the consciousness with our subconscious an evolutionary process or an instant transformation? Is this state nirvana?
So just uniting the consciousness with the unconsciousness isn't nirvana in and of itself. No, it's a lot more than that. This is just one of the practices that's necessary, because this is very similar to the Jungian philosophy of dealing with the shadow. So it's something that exists even in Western psychology, and in and of itself is not the end, but it does assist the process of releasing samskaras. So there is still attachment, even though one is able to observe one's own unconscious mind. The objective is now to release elements of those into. There's no need to worry about where they go, but just releasing attachments is itself. That's really what nirvana is. The grasping, the ending of the grasping. I thank you, Helena, for the kind words. I spent too long reading. Then Ellie asks the question about the diamond body and the rainbow body and the astral body and the bodies of light. So, in fact, the body of light and subtle bodies are part of all forms of Buddhism. In terms of how necessary they are, it's difficult to say. In the practice of jhanas, at the attainment of the fourth jhana, there is the manifestation of the mind-made body and then a nimitta Buddha, which is a kind of like a transformation Buddha that's formed from mind. So this is a part of Buddhism which is very similar to the astral body. And part of my PhD research actually is about this, which is this body of light and its role in esoteric Buddhism in enlightenment, because it's used more in esoteric Buddhism as a vehicle for enlightenment. In the Pali Canon, it's kind of like a byproduct of the path to enlightenment. So it is not the objective, but it's something that manifests on the way to nirvana. So yeah, the bodies of light is definitely something that's important in Buddhism throughout all traditions.
There's a comment in the chat, Ryōtoku, it seems as if you were born with this incredible knowledge. Impressive.
I had just many years of too much reading. Thank you, though. Thank you.
So can I just clarify then, what is the ultimate goal here in terms of moving towards nirvana? Or how should you perceive reality at that stage, and what does the consciousness look like?
So in my opinion, the goal has to be step by step. I'm not a big fan of having a big illustrious goal. I want to become a Buddha, because often that's ego talking. I feel like the most important thing is to remove the obstructions towards our own ability to be at least free. So we ourselves can constrict ourselves and bind ourselves, and at the same time obscure like how we interact with the world. So at the very basic level, in my opinion, we should remove all of those things that we're doing to ourselves negatively, holding ourselves back. There's like a picture of like it's a practice of a horse and the horse is trained to be attached to this chair, and it believes that this chair won't move, and it's this chair holds the horse in place. Do you kind of know what I mean? Yeah. So the chair can't actually hold the horse, but the horse believes that it can't move this chair. And so it's a belief, it's been given this belief by its master in order to control it. But there's ways to train animals to obey, to trick it. But we do that to ourselves all the time. We create boundaries and limitations and identities and all of these things within ourselves that limit us. And then we think, I can't be who I am because of my past. I can't be things because of my race or gender or whatever it may be. You may limit yourself. That's just one example of a limitation that could be done. And it's seeing these limits we have on ourselves and learning that those are constructs that we are been either given to us by others or forced onto us by others, or given to us created by ourselves. So that's the first stage, and then it's a continuation of that and liberating our mind in many ways. I feel like that can bring about instant happiness that everybody can benefit from, and then that can lead towards greater senses of realizations in time, because I think that it's even like realization is something that we shouldn't think, okay, I want one big moment where I just instantly become Buddha. I think that we should focus on, I want to slowly remove ignorance, and I want to slowly remove the blocks on my own heart, my ability to be compassionate. Often these things come about through our own blockages that we make on ourselves. How can I remove these things? By seeing what they are. When you see something, then you have control over it. Like the alaya, the issue with seeing the alaya is there's so many things within us that control us, that navigate us in the wrong way, that take us away from joy and happiness, but we can't see it because it's held within our unconscious state or repressed somewhere. But once we're able to see those things that are controlling us, we can take power back and take back power back into our own lives in a direction that serves us.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is like moving beyond the conceptual world, or really delving quite deeply into seeing objects as they are.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. Seeing objects, and both external and internal. And this in Buddhism is said to really bring about good results. Just seeing things as they are. Simran.
Yeah, on this topic of seeing things as they are and realizing the reality or truth or words like that people use, my question is, how do you know that what sort of discoveries you're having aren't just your deluded mind telling you that that's the truth? Like, how do you know that that is the truth and not the truth because the deluded mind said it's the truth?
And it's funny because even if that post about LSD, this is sometimes the differences between drug-induced realizations and ones that can be done through meditation. They both can sometimes give you the same answers, but sometimes, ones that are done with hallucinations can be created. And sometimes people say the difference between synthetic and non-synthetic is where these visions and these things come from. But with meditation, you can also get the same kind of things that might not be true. It's very true. You can see things that might not be the case. But there is one, it's good to have a teacher. It's very helpful to have a guide, in my opinion, so somebody you can have a back and forth from. Two, the precepts is very important. So the precepts in Sila in Buddhism helps to create a framework to bounce back on. Now, everything that you're experiencing, for the most part, will align with the moral framework in which you can see yourself in the world. Compassion, Brahma Viharas, for the most part, in my opinion, at least from my experience, about to give my opinion, it always harmonizes with Sila. And this, and you have Prajna, the aim, Samadhi, the practice, and Sila is the outcome. If things are leading you away from Sila, probably what you're seeing isn't correct. If you're coming out in the world and you're seeing something and it's making you engage in a world where you're able to be more compassionate, you're able to see the goodness in others, and see this is probably wisdom. There's some people who obtain wisdom, and at the same time, they actually become more rude to other people, and they look down on people, and they become arrogant and all these things. For me, I think that that's not true wisdom if that's the case, because you're not reflecting somebody who has enlightened qualities. But as you start to manifest sila specifically as one of the qualities, that's a good sign that you're seeing something true. And in Buddhism, it's different from other religions. True and good go hand in hand. Compassion and wisdom and these things, they seem to be two sides of one movement, two wings on one bird or two wheels on one car. So you have to always mirror or think wisdom and compassion. Seeing in yourself has to be both compassion for yourself and has to manifest outwards compassion towards others. Then I believe, from my experience, it's true.
Thank you so much. It's funny because today I got my coffee in a cup that said compassion research, which is funny, but also thank you for validifying experiences that people can have on drugs, because now that you mentioned it, in my life before I discovered Buddhism, I was taking a particular drug, and I remember having this experience way before I even knew anything about Buddhism, of my mind was sort of, it went so far past my body, but I could see like far beyond the earth and all these levels. And there's like some sort of links I can see between that sort of experience and then teaching and spiritual teachings, some related to Buddhism. And a lot of the times you can think, oh, is that delusion? But then it's got those links between what is actually taught. So it's really weird, but thank you for really validating that experience too.
My pleasure. Yeah, those experiences again, they're not untrue. There's much truth in those experiences, but they don't have the framework that Buddhism helps to provide. And Buddhism helps to help shape these experiences in a way which they can be assimilated and used in a useful manner. Sometimes ayahuasca, LSD, mushrooms, they can just give you these things that you're not quite ready for, and then it doesn't become useful, and then it becomes not good. So the truth and good always should go hand in hand, and that's why slow is good, and that's why ideally with a teacher and a guidance or a sangha together is very important, and you helping to support each other, be there for each other whenever somebody has anything difficulty going on.
Thank you. Interesting discussions. And I suppose the other thing about Buddhist meditation is that there's a bit more of a foundation if you have these experiences through meditation,
Yes.
rather than through other means.
And sorry, I just wanted to translate the word sila before Ryōtoku. I know that most people are familiar with the term already, but in case there's someone who doesn't know, then sila means ethical conduct, basically here, and yeah.
Thank you for that. I always forget.
Hmm.
Everybody knows all these Pali words.
Just in case. I think most people know, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Were there any last? Oh, Brooke, you've got a question. Great.
Hello. I have a question about meditation and like bad dreams and nightmares. I've noticed since like beginning meditation, like really getting into meditation, my nightmares have and dreams have increased a lot, and also they're very vivid, and they're, what do you call it? I remember them very vividly as well, but they're very like extreme now. And I don't know, like, is that just going to be a side effect like forever now, or is it something that's gonna pass? Because it's already been a year. So it's been a year of the nightmares. So is that like something that passes with meditation, or is that like a common thing? That's
What type of meditation do you practice?
I usually just meditate with like here with Metta Center most of the time. So we do like a lot of metta meditation, vipassana, I don't know, awareness, breathing. Yeah, just the regular ones. But I also have a very vivid imagination and a very active mind as well.
So generally speaking, I recommend people focusing on like mindfulness of the body when the mind gets carried away too much. is a good practice, specifically focusing on the sensations of the body. However, you can also experiment with visualizations, types of meditation, to train the mind to be able to direct the way in which it shapes itself. So training the mind to be able to behave itself, essentially. So you can experiment with those both elements. With the metta practice, for example, you can actually practice when you're doing the metta, whether you're sending it. I think if you do metta bhavana, you do it in 4 stages. You do that one. You can actually practice when you're doing metta bhavana. If you're sending compassion, actually envision the people that you're sending it to, and make it more of a visual experience, and engage in the active part of the brain to be able to engage in compassion. And at least then you're training this component of the brain, which creates images, to be able to do something that will be beneficial both for you and for others. That may assist either focusing on specifically the embodiment practice more, where you're connecting with the physical element of the body, or when you're doing things like metta, bhavana, and compassion, metta, and equanimity, actually engage in the mind more, to be able to train the mind to be able to stay into positive things.
I'm just typing it down. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, any last questions? Otherwise, we might close up for the night.
I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to make a comment about what you said earlier, Ryōtoku, about how we often perceive the snake, a robe as a snake. I know a story of someone, perhaps a Buddhist monk or a practitioner, somebody who spent some time in the forest in Asia, and that person had encounters with wild animals all the time, elephants and tigers. And when that person moved to another place, I can't remember what country, let's say Australia, the same thing happened. This person was alone in the tent, and they heard some noises, and immediately it was very easy how the mind was playing the tricks. This must be a big bear or something, like an elephant walking past, but in fact it was just a little possum or something. I don't know if you know what possum is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how I also experienced this myself. When you think, oh, this could be this or that, but then the mind was playing tricks, and the truth is often magnified. I mean, our imagination is magnified, and it's far from the truth, from the reality.
During fight or flight kind of instances, it goes into overdrive, and then we can really see how we make up stuff. But we do that all the time, every second, moment after moment. It's just that in these instances, it's just to the extreme. We can really start to make up things that don't exist. But that's a good time for practice. But yeah, we can visualize this all the time. I think Ellie asked, when am I back again? I'm not so sure. Hopefully, maybe I can see you guys again. But I hope to at least maybe we can exchange details. If you guys have, maybe I'll give you guys my email. You guys can email me any questions, any regarding anything, and I can help out or give advice.
Actually, on that note, Ellie, I was just going to ask a similar question. I was wondering if anyone here would agree, because I'm in charge of inviting the teachers to our weekly sessions. Ryōtoku, would you be open to running another session sometime this year, and perhaps this time, the next session could just be dedicated to questions and answers, because I believe that the way you lead the question and answers is great. It's fantastic. And with your knowledge, what do people think about inviting Ryōtoku again, just for the questions and answers? Maybe we can focus on a few topics, maybe, or themes, and then we can ask questions. And would you be open to that, maybe, Ryōtoku?
I would, yeah. I would definitely, any way I can assist, I'll be happy to assist in your practice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
There is a last question. Okay, so the question is, what happens to our minds when we overthink, and are there any tips on how to handle it?
Overthinking. So for me personally, in the previous session we talked about practice, and in that one of the areas of overthinking is related to consciousness, which in this talk we mentioned as the manos vijnana. And the practice of dealing with it was samadhi, which is the practice of unification of the mind. So when the mind overthinks, it's starting to turn and roll, and it's like a wheel that's gone off of a car and gone off on its own. And sometimes many of the wheels go off, and they all go off in different directions, and you're all trying to go and get all these wheels to get the car moving in the right direction. So to practice, if you think of the mind when it does start to overthink, if you want to sit with it, is to focus on the flow of thoughts from moment after a moment. And as you start to do it, there's like gaps between, and the gaps can be large. And as the more you do it, the gaps become smaller between each thought. And it's like you're dragging all of these things together and forcing it to go into one line. Now, even then, when your mind is overthinking, if it's moving on one track, it's easier for it to control. And then slowly you can observe it. And then it becomes, it engages in the practice with you. So your mind is separate and it's not doing what it wants you to do. And you're trying to observe your own self. As you start to observe yourself, the other parts of your mind that are separate join you and also engage in the observation. And you're training the mind to watch rather than act. And in that observation practice, the mind begins to become unified, and the mind begins to become naturally pacified and stops going off into every direction. I like in this way, I like to think it visually, and this helps me to understand what the mind is doing. And if you think of it like wheels on a car or wheels on a train, all just flying off, and the train's going wild, you can think about getting these wheels back on, the train back on the track, and the mind moving in one direction. So that for me helps me to focus and practice to unify the mind into samadhi.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So I'll just finish up with a couple of announcements, and then we'll go to chanting if that's okay.
Okay.
There's the yoga classes tomorrow for anyone who wants to join. Bankstown, same place, 6:30, and then there is Bante Sukachito, who's visiting from Germany. He'll be giving a talk on Wednesday in the Parramatta campus on the power of pause. So feel free to join in person or online for that.
And also, sorry, on that note, sorry to interrupt you, Mayan, but on that note, also I was informed that if anybody happens to be in the Parramatta area, Bante Sukachita will be joining Bante Sujato for Pindapata on Wednesday, and anyone is welcome to join, apparently.
Great. Okay, thank you. So he'll be here for a little while, hey, for a couple of weeks. So there's various events with Bante around Sydney. Okay, and then we've got the Santi nuns giving the monthly workshops on Sundays. Ajahn Yu is coming and giving a retreat in May, so feel free to sign up for that. We're taking bookings now. He is a monk who trained under Ajahn Ganha. He's visiting from Hong Kong. We also have a weekend with, sorry, I've forgotten his name, Ajahn Vimoka. Will be giving a weekend retreat as well next month. So a couple of events coming up. So have a look in the newsletter and just see what's coming up on the WhatsApp group to be in touch with that. So thank you again, Ryōtoku, for giving the talk tonight. And I'll just hand over to you for the closing chanting.
Thank you. So I'll again begin with reverence, with the sunrise, and then I'll close with the transference of Nishin Jorai Jipo Pai Joju Sammo Nishin Jorai Jipo Pai Joju Sammo Ishin Jorai Transference of merit. 願にしく徳不病を一切が東洋修上海具上仏道 Thank you all very much for having me. I enjoyed today a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you, so do we. So it seems like we'll probably get you back pretty soon.
Thank you so much, Ryōtoku.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
Thanks for all your questions and thanks for joining in tonight. Have a good night.
Thank you.